Hey y'all, Charleston's first health and wellness festival is coming up in just a few weeks. Live Wild Fest is taking place May 4th and 5th at Holy City Brewing in North Charleston, and it is the first of its kind. Rather than being your normal health and wellness expo where you receive thousands of business cards, Live Wild Fest is entirely experiential. Join them for 2 full days of offerings from movement classes, meditation, cacao ceremonies, cold plunging, saunas, and more, and all of it supporting and uplifting local businesses. Each day ends with live music from artists such as Arizona, Matt Kearney, Evan Gia, and more. Whether you are new to health and wellness or you are a seasonal practitioner, this festival is for you. You will leave inspired, connected, and part of a community based on joy and celebration. So join them at Live Wild Fest this May 4th and 5th. They have single day or full weekend passes available now. The ticket link is livewildfest.com/tickets. Again, that's livewildfest.com/tickets. Holy City Center Radio is episode 244, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, April 19th, 2024. Hello, everyone. I hope you had an amazing week. You may or may not realize that Earth Day is just around the corner, and so we have an interview that has to do a little bit with what that whole day is about. I'm speaking today with Trey McMillan. He is the founder of the Lowcountry Oyster Company. You may have heard of that business before. Their oysters are available all around town, whether it's in restaurants, Harris Teeters, or if you just bought directly from the company themselves. We'll dive deep into how exactly this business relates to Earth Day. Specifically, we're talking about sustainability, how oysters in general, but also this company helps the ecosystem, and so much more. And I'll let Trey give you the details, since, of course, he is the expert. So that's how it ties into Earth Day. But even if we weren't talking about just that, the business is a very interesting one. Obviously super local as it's here in Charleston. And so just learning about the process of how Lowcountry Oyster Company works, I think is fascinating on its own. But again, how it ties into the bigger picture, I think is important as well. So I hope you enjoy this interview. I hope you have an amazing weekend. And I look forward to speaking with you all again on Monday with whatever the latest news is. But for now, as you get into your weekend, just relax and enjoy this interview with Trey McMillan, the founder of Lowcountry Oyster Company. And as promised, joining me now is Lowcountry Oyster Company founder Trey McMillan. So happy to talk to you today. Thanks for taking the time, Trey.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate you having me, man.
Of course, happy to. And so we're going to talk about the company I just mentioned, as well as some Earth Day related topics such as sustainability and how your company helps out the ecosystem and things. But before we get into that, if you could just provide a little background about yourself, where you're from, and just anything leading up to before you started the company.
Yeah, my name is Trey McMillan. I grew up here in Charleston. I actually grew up in Mount Pleasant over in the old village. I was a professional fisherman for about 15 years before I started my company, Lowcountry Oyster Company, back in I incorporated it 2017 and started selling our first crop in 2018. So we've been at it a few years now. And yeah, we just keeping our head down to the grinding stone.
Very cool. So what you said you had some background sort of related to what you ended up doing with this company. What led you to create the Lowcountry Oyster Company?
So I did, working on the water. It takes I guess you could say, a special person to work on the water every day. It's not something that's easy, but it's also something that's very enjoyable. So that being said, growing up being on the water and all that kind of led me to it. But as a professional fisherman, it's hard to leave that every day, And so this transition was fairly easy because I was still able to be on the water every day, be outside. And I'm obviously not a person that's going to sit behind a desk for 40 hours a week. I don't think I got that in me. So I, I saw it the first time I saw it. I was actually up in Ocean City, Maryland, and I was fishing a tournament up there called White Marlin Open, and saw it on the Chesapeake, and kind of took interest in it, and just started doing some research and visiting some places. And next thing you know, I was taking out a loan and quitting my career and jumping in at feet first. So here we are.
Very cool. So you mentioned you had seen this, and I'm assuming you're talking about a sustainable oyster farm. What does that? How does that differ from how people, normally associate, how their oysters go from ocean, to their plate?
Yeah, I did. The first taste that I got of it was of an oyster farm, and what a lot of people don't really realize is any kind of, and I hate using the word farm, because as soon as you say that and you do any kind of mass production, people automatically just kind of their head just kind of goes to, like, mega farms and
Mm,
all this stuff. When this we are on the total opposite spectrum of that. The way that our farming practice that we actually do, it's a give and take fishery. So the only thing that we take is what we put out there. In other words, we're not going up and down the banks, trampling down the marsh grass and all that stuff, trying to find these oysters. We create these oysters in a safe environment in a hatchery, actually spawn the oysters ourselves, raise them in a land-based nursery until they get to a certain size, and then actually transfer them out to our farm area. And then once they go through the whole year-long process of being maintained and cared for, and they do all their growing and all the things that lead up to our harvest, we only harvest what we've put out there. So it's completely different from what people may think. It's the same as farming, because yes, we are technically planting seeds. Um, we just do it underwater. It's the same thing dirt road farmers do. We just do it underwater.
And obviously you're doing this here in South Carolina, so these are still very much local oysters. I don't know if people, maybe they don't realize that, like they think you're doing this somewhere, in a lab or in some kind of building or something, but very much still in the waters here in South Carolina.
Absolutely, yeah. They're grown right on top of where everybody else gets their wild oyster clusters from. They grow right on top of those. They stay suspended in the water rather than being exposed to the air all the time. Twice a day when the tide goes out.
And you mentioned, how this is sustainable. You're only taking what you put out there. But also, and I think a lot of people, especially who live in this area, already know this. But if you could, how, if you could kind of touch on how important oysters are, to our ecosystem and to our environment.
They are probably the most crucial part, and I'm not saying that to try to validate anything that we do or anything like that. It's just proven data. They're kind of the first line of defense for erosion for spartina grass, the marsh grass that we have. If you have a bunch of boats going through the waterway and throwing wakes all the time, it's like anything else. It's going to start eating away at the shore, at the shore bank. So oyster beds or oyster reefs or whatever you want to call them, the wild reefs are actually the first line of defense to protect the actual marshland. Um, and then, I mean, on top of that, there's a ton of other eco benefits for it. It holds a housing component to it for shrimp and small fish and stuff, which obviously the bigger fish come and eat those, and it's kind of where the habitat all kind of comes into it.
And you kind of alluded to this before, where you said, "Oh, I hate to say farm," because people have like a certain perception in their mind, and made me think maybe you had heard that from folks when you were talking about your business. Has there been any other types of pushback or misinformation that you've had to, or opinions that people had that you've had to correct, as you've discussed your business with people? Is there anything else that you think people may get wrong about it that you want to let them know now?
You can absolutely eat oysters in months that don't have R in them. You can eat oysters all year round. It's that rule. While it's true for some circumstances, they are talking about something that was kind of established back before refrigeration. Nowadays, refrigeration and being able to control how we harvest, what times we harvest. We don't have to wait on low tide. We can harvest at any time because the oysters are constantly suspended in the water, which means they're constantly feeding. So it's a fresh flush of water that goes through them nonstop, which washes basically any kind of harmful bacteria that may be in there, washes it out. And then once that's done, you get them and you get them down to 40 degrees or less. We do it within a matter of minutes, just with the way our whole operations is set up. So that way you're eliminating the risk of any kind of bacteria growing inside the oyster, because it's once it gets down below 40 degrees, everything kind of goes dormant.
And also, I've known about your business for a few years, and I've read interviews and things like that. And one thing is that these hatchery raised oysters, for lack of a better term, they can also eliminate the pressure on wild oysters as well. Correct? This isn't necessarily harming that industry; it's actually helping.
Oh, by all means. I mean, it's by owning a quote unquote oyster farm, we're not by any means taking anything from anybody. So the guys that do wild harvest and stuff, all through the holidays and stuff, they pick oysters for us. And then in the off season, when wild season's closed, they actually work on the farm with us. It's not like we're taking anything from anybody. We're just simply adding another aspect to it while also protecting what we have. As far as the wild stock goes, we're taking the pressure off of it. People want single oysters. That's what we're growing. And before, people were going up and down the banks and literally taking a whole cluster of oysters and banging them all apart and killing, 8 or 10 oysters just to get the one perfect one. We're not doing that anymore. We're doing the exact opposite. We're putting everything back on the banks and letting our natural beds rejuvenate themselves naturally.
And do you have different types of oysters, or you kind of have the same across the board?
It's all the same. Obviously, we have our what everybody knows and what the Lowcountry is known for. The oyster roast and stuff like that, where we have the big clusters of oysters that are all clumped together and they come in a big 40-pound bag. And you throw them in a steamer. We have that, and then we also, but our bread and butter is obviously our farm raised singles. So it's all the same oyster. They're all Eastern oyster. Everything you grow on the East Coast, it's all the same species. It's just much like wine. It takes on the flavor of where it's grown. So it tastes exactly like a normal Lowcountry oyster. Like when you hear that, it tastes exactly like you would think. It's just a more sustainable practice in which we're doing it.
And since you started your company, I think you said 2017, 18, how have you seen it grow? How has it grown, rather, from that time to now? I mean, I see your oysters available in restaurants, and it seems like it's been doing really well.
It has, and I never in a million years would have thought it would have turned into what it is this quickly. When you talk about scalability of something, it's hard to imagine it and really kind of set a plan to it, not really knowing. The market's there, obviously. Charleston is such a great market for seafood in general. We have such great seafood here that it's hard to beat. And pretty much all the seafood that is caught or raised in Charleston or South Carolina, really, it pretty much stays here because it's such a big market. The demand is so high. Obviously, Charleston is such a food related town that not a lot. There's nothing ever been done to scale to really feed that, plus get outside of that region, sort of say, or this area. So that's kind of our goal, and what we've talked about from day one is feeding as many people in the United States as we can on the smallest footprint possible.
And now for people listening, they've got the whole background about the oysters. All the questions have been answered. I'm sure they have. And now they want to get them. Where can people find your oysters, whether it's in restaurants or through, ordering directly through you? How do people get their hands on some of these?
So we have a warehouse downtown Charleston where you can place your order online on our website, which is lowcooysters.com. You can choose to pick up oysters from our warehouse downtown, or you can have them shipped directly to your doorstep. So we do ship nationwide. to the lower 48. We ship anywhere in the nation. And it's all within 24 hours. So when you go online, if you put your order in before 11 a.m., you can have them delivered the next day on your doorstep. And, I mean, you can be, Washington State, California, Texas, wherever you want to be, they'll be there. And then we also sell to Harris Teeter. You can find them in Harris Teeters throughout the country. You can find them in a number of restaurants around town, and really throughout the Southeast at this point. We're trying to get out there. It takes time and it takes inventory. So the two things that take the most patience, I guess, are time and inventory, because it takes a long time to grow an oyster. So to build up your inventory, you got to have time.
And you mentioned that website, lowcooysters.com, where people could find even more information about some of the things we've been talking about here today. Whether they want to order from there or just learn more, they can do that. And also on there, I saw earlier that you also offer tours of the farm, correct?
We do. So we actually have a whole ecotourism department that is agrotourism certified by the Department of Agriculture for South Carolina. And we run farm tours 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. There's a couple different slots that you can get in, or you can do a private tour with just you and a group of your buddies, or anybody can come by themselves, or whatever it is. We kind of try to accommodate everybody that we can, and we show you everything from the beginning nursery stages all the way to eating some oysters when you get back to land after you go out for a boat ride and see it all.
Very cool. And also you have, of course, your business is merch, but also have oyster tools and some bundles, including hot sauce and things on the website as well. So people can kind of get everything they need if they decide to order some oysters through you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we try to keep it as easy as possible while offering the essentials, if you will. Anything you can, think of to eat oysters, enjoy them a couple different ways. We try to offer it. So.
Awesome. Well, before I say goodbye, is there anything that I didn't ask or we didn't touch on that you think is important about the business, or just anything you want to convey to anyone who may be listening? Now I'll let you do that now.
No, really, it's just eat more oysters,
That's hard to argue with. I've had your oysters several times over the years. So even though some of the questions I was asking, I already kind of knew the answers, but just wanted other people to know. They, like you said, they're just like any other, South Carolina oyster as far as taste, and it's a great product, and you're doing great work with, sustainability and all that, which I know a lot of people, especially these days, appreciate and are looking for, while also still staying local. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat today and kind of educate some folks who may not have known all the details. And for anyone who's interested, the website will be in the show notes, but it's lowcooysters.com. And I encourage you all to visit and go get some tasty oysters. Trey, thanks so much for joining me today.
Chris, I certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you.
And that'll do it for this episode of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Trey McMillan. Enjoy your weekend. Get out there and go find some of those oysters. As I mentioned at the end of the interview, I've had them before. They're very tasty. I mean, it's just like any other oyster you would order when you're out and about. They're local, and you learn about the good that oysters in general, but also Trey's company is doing for the environment, specifically here in South Carolina and in Charleston, especially. So get out there and find some. This is not a paid ad. I really have had them before, enjoy them, and have appreciated the work that Trey and his team have been doing over the last few years. Before I say goodbye, I want to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. And of course, thank you to all of you for listening. Can't wait to speak to you all again on Monday. But until then, good night and good luck.